The chamber was heavy with the sound of formality, papers shuffling, pens tapping, the distant hum of cameras capturing yet another hearing that was supposed to fade into the background. But then her voice sliced through the air like a clean line drawn across chaos. "Your Honor, with all due respect." 3 words that carried both calm and challenge. The gallery stilled. Reporters froze mid-scribble. Even the clicking of shutters slowed as though every lens, every microphone, suddenly aware it might be witnessing something that would echo far beyond these walls. Judge Richard Leon looked up. His expression was unreadable, neither stern nor kind, just still, assessing. It wasn't often that someone addressed him with that tone, respectful but unyielding. The kind of tone that doesn't ask permission to speak truth. Crockett's eyes didn't waver. Her posture was calm, almost serene, the kind of calm that comes from knowing you have something undeniable to say. The silence stretched, taut as a held breath. Somewhere in the back row, a spectator whispered, "She's really going to do it." The narrator's voice slides in, steady and cinematic. What could she possibly have said that made even Judge Leon pause? In that instant, the weight of hierarchy, politics, and expectation all hovered in the air, a nation's habit of underestimating. Women like her pressing against the moment like gravity. Every second was a prelude, every blink a drumbeat before the break. Because what came next? One quiet, deliberate sentence would ripple through headlines, ignite millions of screens, and remind an entire country that dignity doesn't shout. It stands, it breathes, it answers back. But no one expected the quiet sentence that followed to shift the tone of the entire hearing. Washington had grown numb to spectacle. Another hearing, another argument, another headline destined to burn bright for a day before vanishing into the churn of partisan noise. The marble halls of power had become echo chambers of fatigue, where speeches were currency and sincerity was a rumor. Judge Richard Leon sat at the center of it all, figure of old-school authority. Sharp, deliberate, occasionally curt, he was known for ruling with precision and little patience for grandstanding. His gavel had restored order in rooms far louder than this one. To him, truth was procedural, something found in the pages of precedent, not the pulse of emotion. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, the newest voice in a long line of lawmakers who had learned that intelligence was sometimes less visible than confidence. She carried herself like someone who had built her place brick by brick: lawyer, advocate, fighter for people who didn't have microphones. To many, she was still the newcomer, the woman who smiled too easily to be dangerous. They didn't know how wrong they were. The hearing began like so many before it, a series of statements, interruptions, and polite deflections. But beneath the monotony, there was a spark, something in the air that hinted this would not stay routine. The narrator's tone sharpens. The rhythm slows. What happens when grace meets power head-on? When the calmest voice in the room refuses to bend? Because this wasn't just about a legal motion or a line of questioning. It was about the invisible fight for dignity, for recognition, for the right to be heard without apology. Yet before anyone could predict it, the routine exchange took a turn that silenced even the skeptics. For decades, Judge Richard Leon had been the steady hand at the bench. It's the kind of jurist who carried the weight of tradition like a second robe. His courtroom ran on rhythm. Question, answer, gavel, order. No theatrics, no nonsense, no indulgence for speeches that stretched beyond their point. In Washington's vast machinery of opinions and ego, Leon had become something rare, predictable authority. To the public, that predictability was reassuring. To those who stood before him, it could feel immovable. His rulings were crisp, his patience measured in seconds, his voice a reminder that here, law reigned above all else. Yet beneath the reverence, there lingered something else, an understanding that authority, when left unexamined, can harden into habit. The walls of his courtroom reflected it, straight lines, polished wood and silence so thick you could hear ambition buckle beneath it. This was not a space for defiance. It was a stage for decorum, discipline, and submission to the institution itself. Those who entered carried not just their arguments, but their posture, their tone, their willingness to fit the mold. Leon embodied the establishment voice, not cruel, but certain, the kind of certainty that leaves no room for nuance. When he leaned forward, brow arched slightly. It wasn't out of malice, but mastery. His clipped interjections, counselor, that's irrelevant. Let's stay on point, were the punctuation marks of a system built to contain emotion within boundaries. And so when Jasmine Crockett spoke, it wasn't just her words he weighed. It was her very presence. A young black congresswoman in a space long dominated by men who mistook volume for vision to Leon. It was unfamiliar terrain. The faintest twitch of his expression, a raised brow, a pause too long, told the story. Power recognized confidence and, instinctively, bristled at it. The air between them grew tense, a quiet duel of composure. Leon had faced grandstanders before, but this was different. There was something in her gaze that didn't seek permission. To exist here, it belonged. But Crockett wasn't about to yield, because behind her calm stare was a lifetime of preparation for this very kind of moment. Before the cameras, before the marble and microphones, there was a young woman studying under the dim glow of a library lamp. Her textbooks stacked like barricades. Jasmine Crockett didn't inherit power. She earned it, one late night and one case file at a time. Law school wasn't glamorous. It was coffee gone cold, bills unpaid, and a voice whispering that she didn't belong. But she stayed. She listened to that voice just long enough to learn how to answer it. Her mother's words followed her everywhere. Baby, don't raise your voice. Raise your value. That became her compass. When professors underestimated her, she smiled. When clients doubted her youth, she doubled her preparation. When opposing counsel tried to out-talk her, she waited, then dismantled them with patience sharpened into art. Her world wasn't built in ivory towers, but in community halls where folding chairs and handwritten flyers held more conviction than any press release. She fought for tenants facing eviction, for workers whose paychecks vanished into loopholes. Her victories were small, untelevised, but every one of them carried the same message. Dignity isn't given, it's defended. Her first courtroom win felt less like triumph and more like awakening. She remembered the hush that followed her closing argument, the way the jury foreperson struggled to meet her eyes. That's when she learned words could shift rooms, not because they were loud, but because they were true. By the time she entered Congress, she carried not ambition but memory, the memory of every person who'd been talked over, dismissed, or underestimated. That memory steadied her hand as she faced the weight of Judge Leon's gaze. This wasn't just another hearing. It was her moment to show what dignity looks like under fire. And when the moment finally came, the tone of the entire room changed, not with shouting, but with precision. It began with a simple procedural question, the kind that usually floats through hearings unnoticed, buried beneath formality. Crockett posed it clearly, her tone even, her logic airtight. But something in the phrasing caught Judge Leon's ear. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing, voice clipped. "Counselor, that's outside the scope. Let's move on." A ripple of murmurs drifted across the gallery. Crockett didn't flinch. Her hands stayed folded on the table, her breath calm, deliberate. When she spoke again, it wasn't louder, it was clearer. "Respectfully, Your Honor, the scope is exactly the point." The gavel struck once, sharp, echoing, final. The sound bounced against the chamber walls like a warning. Cameras refocused. Aides glanced nervously at one another. It was the kind of silence that could swallow a career or birth a moment. Leon's tone sharpened. "Let's keep this relevant, representative." Every word became a chess move, every pause a trap to test the other's composure. Crockett met his gaze without breaking rhythm, her voice steady, her argument unfolding like a slow reveal. The narrator's voice cuts through the tension. Each line now felt like a step closer to collision, grace against gravity, calm against command. Around them, the air thickened with anticipation. Even those who had written her off leaned forward, drawn by something unexpected, not defiance, but precision. The duel wasn't about power anymore. It was about who could stay still the longest in the face of it. She waited, hands clasped, eyes fixed. For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to hold its breath with her. And then the line that made even Judge Leon sit back in his chair. Her reply didn't come in a rush. It came like a slow dawn, unfolding word by word, precise as a verdict. "Your Honor," she began, her voice carrying the warmth of courtesy and the weight of certainty. When procedure is used to silence relevance, it stops being procedure, it becomes protection. A ripple of air seemed to move through the room. Reporters froze, pens hanging in midair. A staffer's phone slipped from their hand, clattering softly against the floor. Crockett didn't flinch. Her gaze never left the bench. Her tone never rose. Her words did all the lifting. Each syllable struck with the quiet rhythm of conviction, honed over years of being talked over, second-guessed, underestimated. The narrator's voice threads through the moment. It wasn't defiance. It was discipline. It was the difference between shouting to be heard and knowing you already are. Judge Leon blinked. For the first time, the distance between authority and understanding seemed to narrow. His posture eased, not in defeat, but in recognition. What hung in the air wasn't tension anymore. It was respect, reluctant but real. In the gallery, someone let out a low exhale. Another whispered, "Did she just say that?" Then came the subtle, contagious sound of reaction, murmurs, gasps, the soft click of 1,000 screens capturing the moment. Hashtags were already being typed, for a brief second. Even the cameras seemed unsure where to focus, on the judge's face, on hers, or on the space between them where something larger than debate had just unfolded. Commentators later call it a masterclass in restraint. A quiet revolution, a reminder that composure can still cut deeper than outrage. Crockett said nothing more. She didn't need to. The silence that followed was its own statement, deep, resonant, absolute. And in that silence, she'd already won. But what happened after the camera stopped rolling was even more revealing. By nightfall, the clip had escaped the chamber and flooded every corner of the internet. It opened the way moments of power always do, raw, unedited, impossible to look away from. Hashtags multiplied like wildfire. Hashtag Crockett moment. Hashtag respect over age. Edits layered her words over swelling music, each replay amplifying the same quiet defiance that had frozen the courtroom hours before. News anchors framed it as a clash of eras, tradition meeting transformation. Some called it a turning point for decorum, others a masterstroke of restraint. And though opinions split, admiration outweighed cynicism. Even those who disagreed found themselves replaying the exchange. Searching for the exact second when composure turned the tide, politicians posted statements. Some diplomatic, some desperate to claim proximity to the moment. Law professors dissected her phrasing on morning shows, calling it rhetorical precision under institutional pressure. But it wasn't academics who carried the torch, it was the students. Young law hopefuls quoted her line in debate clubs. Community organizers replayed it in workshops. Even cynics admitted, if only quietly, that something about it felt earned. The narrator returns, voice steady. Sometimes the loudest victories come from silence. From the refusal to be dragged down into the noise, in a world addicted to outrage, Crockett's calm had gone viral. Not because it was dramatic, but because it reminded people that clarity still cuts through chaos. Her words weren't just replayed, they were remembered. But beneath the applause lies a deeper question. What does this moment really say about justice in America today? What happened in that courtroom wasn't just an exchange between a judge and a congresswoman. It was something older. A confrontation between institution and integrity, between the way things have always been and the way they still could be. Crockett didn't challenge the gavel. She challenged the assumption that power only speaks one language, volume. In a country so often defined by shouting matches and sound bites, composure has become a revolutionary act. She didn't out-yell authority. She outlasted it. That restraint, that refusal to perform rage for the cameras, became its own form of protest. The narrator's voice settles, measured and reverent. When words meet truth, even power listens. History remembers those moments, the ones where courage looks less like fury and more like stillness. Rosa Parks sitting, Shirley Chisholm standing, Barack Obama pausing before saying what others were afraid to name. Crockett joined that quiet lineage, proof that dignity can still be disruptive. Her victory wasn't in the clip, the headlines, or the applause that followed. It was in the redefinition of what strength looks like in public life. She didn't win an argument. She redefined respect, and in doing so, she reminded millions watching that humility and intelligence don't just coexist with power, they refine it. For those who had doubted her, the moment was a correction. For those who saw themselves in her, it was a mirror, a reminder that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stay calm in the face of dismissal. And as the echoes of that day fade, one truth remains: America still listens when dignity speaks. Judge Leon was impressed, but the real story was what Jasmine Crockett showed us about ourselves. In a city that thrives on conflict, she reminded America that intellect and respect can still shock the world. Her words didn't just echo through that courtroom. They echoed through every heart that's ever felt talked over or underestimated. In times of cynicism, remember this moment. Remember that the sharpest weapon in a noisy world isn't volume, it's vision. That calm, when wielded with conviction, can still bend the room toward truth. If you felt that, don't just watch, amplify. Share this story. Subscribe to keep these voices alive, because this isn't just about one exchange. It's about the culture we choose to build, one where dignity isn't weakness, where justice still feels human, because sometimes the most powerful sound in politics is a single, calm sentence.